We are going into the first story here. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but shout out to Daniel, who reported this through The Intercept. You know, for quite some time, I've been saying that mainstream media is bought and paid for. You guys know this, right? And I've also said that they echo the same talking points as the State Department. Well, now it appears that CNN has apparently been running their post-October 7th coverage by Israel. I kid you not. Let's get into it. Interesting story here. CNN runs Gaza coverage past Jerusalem, team operating under shadow of IDF censor. The Jerusalem Bureau has long reviewed all CNN stories related to Israel and Palestine. Now it's helping shape the network's coverage of the war. So why is this story important? So that you'll understand why CNN has the talking points that they have in reference to this conflict with Israel and Gaza. This is a very revealing story here. I've been saying this for quite some time, but now we actually have evidence that this has been happening all along. And shout out to Daniel Bugaslaw, who reported this on January 4th. This came my way actually the other day. Whether reporting from the Middle East, the United States, or anywhere else across the globe, every CNN journalist covering Israel and Palestine must submit their work for review by the news organization's bureau in Jerusalem prior to publication under a long-standing CNN policy. Now, let me ask you guys a question. How is that not bias? Obviously, if there's certain content that CNN may want to air, if they're running the war coverage by Jerusalem first before they publish it, obviously they're going to tell them to remove pieces that appear to be more in favor of Gaza. Like, I can't make this up. I'll make sure to put this link to the article in the chat because I want you to share this article with as many people as possible. While CNN says the policy is meant to ensure accuracy in reporting on a polarizing subject, it means that much of the network's recent coverage of the war in Gaza and its reverberations around the world has been shaped by journalists who operate under the shadow of the country's military censor. And ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why the need for independent media is so important. This is why you can't trust mainstream media. And once again, this points to the fact that, as I've said before, is this the United States of America or is this the United States of Israel? Because it seems like Netanyahu has been making a lot of decisions in reference to how things operate in this particular country. Like all foreign news organizations operating in Israel, CNN's Jerusalem Bureau is subject to the rules of the IDF censor, which dictates subjects that are off limits for the news organizations to cover. It censors articles it deems unfit or unsafe to print. Unsafe and unfit for who? Here we have the IDF actually censoring content from mainstream media in the United States. This is why I said, and I'll say this again, guys, the woman Mazi Philippe, who is running for Congress to replace George Soros. Remember I told you she was a part of the IDF? She has dual citizenship. We really need to question why the U.S. government is allowing people to hold political office on the national level when they have dual citizenship. If you have dual citizenship for another country, like I said, if a conflict were to happen with that country, 9 times out of 10, you are going to be favorable to that country. It's just common sense. Let's continue. As The Intercept reported last month, the military censor recently restricted 8 subjects, including security cabinet meetings, information about hostages, and reporting on weapons captured by fighters in Gaza. In order to obtain a press pass in Israel, foreign reporters must sign a document agreeing to abide by the dictates of the censor. I'm going to highlight this again. Check this out, folks. In order to obtain a press pass in Israel, foreign reporters must sign a document agreeing to abide by the dictates of the censor. In other words, journalists who want to report in Israel basically have to agree to be censored. CNN's practice of routing coverage through the Jerusalem Bureau does not mean that the military censor directly reviews every story. Still, the policy stands in contrast in other major news outlets, which in the past have run sensitive stories through desks outside of Israel to avoid the pressure of the censor. On top of the official and unspoken rules for reporting from Israel, CNN recently issued directives to its staff on specific language to use and avoid when reporting on violence in the Gaza Strip. Now they're telling their reporters what type of language they're allowed to use. This is why you have to support independent journalists. You have to support people like Al Jazeera. You have to support people who are out there on the ground. You got to support people like the Gray Zone, people who have been there covering from Gaza. The network also hired a former soldier from the IDF's military spokesperson unit to serve as a reporter at the onset of the war. This is very problematic. The network hired a former soldier from the IDF's military spokesperson unit to serve as a reporter at the onset of the war. So here we have an American network hiring someone from a foreign country to serve as the reporter at the onset of this war. So obviously the coverage is going to be biased. Obviously. The policy of running stories about Israel or the Palestinians past the Jerusalem Bureau has been in place for years. A CNN spokesperson told The Intercept in an email, "It is simply down to the fact that there are many unique and complex local nuances that warrant extra scrutiny to make sure our reporting is as precise and accurate as possible." But their reporting has not been precise and accurate as possible. CNN and all these other major networks basically ran with the beheaded baby story, then had to come back and debunk it. They ran with this story of one of the IDF soldiers walking through one of the hospitals. Remember the Al-Shifa hospital? Walking through the hospital, pointing to a calendar on the wall and basically saying, yeah, see this? This is Hamas. This is their plan here, Hamas. And it was a calendar, a basic calendar. The reporting has not been precise. The reporting has not been accurate at all. And we've all seen it. The spokesperson added that the protocol has no impact on our minimal interactions with the Israeli military censor, and we do not share copy with them or any government body in advance. We will seek comment from Israeli and other relevant officials before publishing stories, but this is just good journalistic practice. Are they seeking comment from Palestinians, from Palestinian journalists in Gaza before they publish their stories on CNN? No, they're not. They're only doing this in reference to Israel because that right there lets you know the narrative that they want to push is that the state of Israel is correct and the Palestinian people are wrong. One member of CNN staff who spoke to The Intercept on the condition of being anonymous here for fear of professional reprisal said that the internal review policy has had a demonstrable impact on coverage of the Gaza war. Every single Israeli-Palestine related line for reporting must seek approval from the Jerusalem Bureau, or when the Bureau is not staffed, from a select few handpicked by the Bureau and senior management, from which lines are most often edited with a very specific nuance that favors Israeli narratives. So when it comes to mainstream media in this country, these outlets, in reference to the United States, they repeat State Department talking points. Now we find out that these outlets are also repeating Israeli Department talking points, anything that basically favors the Israeli narrative. This is propaganda 101. The commentators that you see on these networks, people like Jake Tapper, people like Anderson Cooper, these people are just reading a script. There's a teleprompter in front of them and they are just reading it. I know I interned in this. I majored in broadcast journalism. I know how it works. They're not doing actual reporting. So the script that is put before them, that's what they're instructed to read. And that's pretty much, for the most part, what they go with. They're not really questioning things. And if they were to question, those people are usually removed. This is why people like Mark Lamont Hill no longer work for these networks. When you go against the narrative, they'll get rid of you. So it goes on to say here, a shaky arrangement has long existed between the IDF censor and the domestic and foreign press, forcing journalists to frequently self-censor their reporting for fear of running afoul of prohibited subjects, losing their press credentials, and potentially being forced to offer public apology. CNN, like other American broadcasters, has repeatedly agreed to submit footage recorded in Gaza to the military censor prior to airing it in exchange for limited access to the Strip, drawing criticism from those who say the censor is providing a filtered view of events unfolding on the ground. And this is why it is incredibly important that a lot of us are paying attention to the video footage on social media. I can find out more about what is taking place in Gaza from Twitter/X than I can from CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. It's just a reality. When you have a protocol that routes all stories through one checkpoint, you're interested in control. And the question is, who is controlling the story? That is coming from Jim Narekas, editor of the watchdog group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. CNN's team in Jerusalem are the people closest to the Israeli government. I will say again, CNN's team in Jerusalem are the people who are the closest to the Israeli government. So there's not going to be any bias there, right? In a situation where a government has been credibly accused of singling out journalists for violent attacks in order to suppress information, to give that government a heightened role in deciding what is news and what isn't news is really disturbing. This is one thing that I agreed with Trump on, is when he called out fake news, right? Now, granted, he said that just in reference to CNN, but all of it's that way. It's CNN, it's MSNBC, it's Fox News. It's the narrative that they want you to hear. Now, some of you may question, why is it that they won't present both sides in a fair way? Because they don't want us to have criticism of the state of Israel. We have to understand, even when we looked at the Epstein situation, you connect Epstein to Mossad, to the Israeli government. You connect him to Alan Dershowitz, who is now being summoned by Netanyahu to go represent the state of Israel at the ICJ, to represent a foreign country. Dual citizenship, right? You have to look at what's really happening here, what's really taking place. You have to look at the fact that a lot of our politicians are bought and paid for by organizations like AIPAC and J Street. You have to look at the fact that the reason why President Joe Biden is not willing to call for a ceasefire is because Joe Biden has taken the most money from the Israeli lobby. That goes back to all the way back to 1990. He's taken the most. Always goes back to the money. While CNN used its standing to obtain raw footage of human suffering inside Gaza, it has also pushed out near daily updates delivered directly from the IDF to its American and international viewers and embedded reporters alongside Israel soldiers fighting in the war. So here we have CNN basically taking information that's been handed to them by the IDF. Early in the war in October 26, CNN News Standards and Practice Division sent an email to staff outlining how they should write about the war. Here we go. Hamas controls the government in Gaza, and we should describe the Ministry of Health as Hamas controlled whenever we are referring to casualty statistics or other claims related to the present conflict. Now, why is that important to you guys? Remember when Joe Biden made that statement and said that he did not agree with the number of casualties that were being reported from Gaza? That goes straight back to what CNN was instructed to do. The media is the number one source of propaganda. If you can't shut down the media machine, it's very difficult to shut down the propaganda machine. So one of the ways that people have begun to do that, again, has been by the massive protests all across the globe. That has what has caused the media to change some of their narrative. They were pushed to do so. They're not going to do so willingly. So think about that. Every single one of them are parroting those talking points. Piers Morgan, for the longest time, questioned the casualties. Fox News, question the casualties. This is what they were all told to do. I do not believe that these instructions were just given to employees at CNN. Listen to this part. If the underlying statistics have been derived from the Ministry of Health in Gaza, we should note that fact, and that this part of the ministry is Hamas controlled, even if the statistics are released by the West Bank part of the ministry or elsewhere. Thus, if they tell people that the ministry of health is Hamas controlled, then it's supposed to make the public not believe the number of casualties. It's supposed to make them question what's being reported. And it does something else too. I want to get to this point. It also makes them think negatively about the Palestinian people. Now, think about what we just found out, and I want you to apply that to Russia and Ukraine. You don't think the same thing is happening with Russia and Ukraine, where these networks have been told any positive information that comes out of Russia, you are supposed to try to dispute it or make it seem like it's not valid, and that they are supposed to boost any information coming from Ukraine and Zelensky? It's all controlled, folks. It's all controlled. The email goes on to acknowledge CNN's responsibility to cover the human cost of the war, but couches that responsibility in the need to cover the broader current geopolitical and historical context of the story, while continuing to remind our audiences of the immediate cause of the current conflict, namely the Hamas attack and the mass murder and kidnap of Israeli civilians. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, they always start with October 7th. This is why you hear people like Piers Morgan say, but do you condemn Hamas? This is why all these pundits, I don't even care if they're on CNN or not. This is why all these pundits are always starting off this story with October 7th, because that's what they were instructed to do. Anderson Cooper should hang his head in shame. Piers Morgan should hang his head in shame. These people aren't speaking on behalf of what they feel in their self. They're doing what the Israeli government told them to do. They want you to leave out the history. This is why whenever they're having this conversation with someone like Cornel West or someone like Norm Finkelstein, this is why the moment they start to mention the history of this struggle, the commentator tries to interrupt them because that is not supposed to be discussed. Again, they were instructed to start with October 7th. Now, compare that to Russia and Ukraine, where you'll see the same talking points taking place. I'm sure these networks were told, start with Russia invaded Ukraine. Don't tell them about what happened years prior to that. Don't talk about the Minsk Accords. Don't talk about NATO's agreement not to expand. Don't talk about that. Just start with Russia invaded Ukraine. And this is something I think a lot of people, just for whatever reason, at the start of that war could not grasp. You know, I listened to people that have been doing this for like a long time, and they were doing the same thing. They were falling for it. They were starting with who invaded who, totally forgetting the history prior to that. One more piece here, and then I want to show you something else that I think is important connecting this as well. The email further instructed reporters and editors to make it clear to our audiences either or both sides have provided verifiable evidence to support their claims. In a separate directive dated November 2nd, Senior Director of News Standards and Practices, David Lindsay, cautioned reporters from relaying statements from Hamas. As the Israel-Gaza war continues, Hamas representatives are engaging in inflammatory rhetoric and propaganda. Most of it has been said many times before, and it is not newsworthy. You see this? We should be careful not to give it a platform. He added, though, that if a senior Hamas official makes a claim or threat that is editorially relevant, such as changing their message or trying to rewrite events, we can use it if it's accompanied by greater context. And this has happened before with Afghanistan. Listen to this part. The language of the directives mirrors similar orders from CNN management at the start of the war in Afghanistan in 2001, when Chair Walter Isaacson ordered foreign correspondents at the network to play down civilian deaths and remind readers that the violence they were witnessing was a direct result of the attacks on September 11th. Does this all sound familiar, guys? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I told you, we've been here before. We have been here before. Now, I want you to think about what I just told you. The fact that CNN basically is running their war stories in reference to Israel and Gaza by Israel through the IDF before they publish these stories. Think about that. And I want you to listen to this commentator on Talk TV. I want you to watch the way she berates this man. Obviously, he is on the side for Palestinian justice. I want you to watch the way she talks to him. Again, think about what we just learned and watch the way that she speaks to him, and you'll understand why. Listen to this.
You say you don't approve of...
And do you think that Israel is a democratic country?
I know that Israel is a democracy. They have elections.
No, this man is now has 4 courts against him because of 4 cases of corruption. This man knows if the war stops,
we haven't got time to do the entire history of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is not a popular figure in Israel. I'm not here to defend Benjamin Netanyahu. Mustafa, is it possible to...
Whenever I speak about Palestinian rights, or Palestinian situation, you claim it is history. I'm talking about what's happening today.
No, I know.
This is not history.
Can we just... You talked about how you don't want Israel. You're saying Israel that October the 7th happened. You're placing that in historical context. I understand that. Please don't say that again. We don't have time for it. You've made that point 5 times already.
I don't know what you have time for.
Oh, my God. For the love of God, let me finish a sentence, man. Maybe you're not used to women talking. I don't know. But I'd like to finish a sentence, sir. Anyway, so...
No, you are misleading the public now
really?
By claiming
I've got 20 seconds left. I'm not even going to bother trying to answer. If you don't think Israel's reaction is acceptable, what would have been an acceptable reaction to you? You've got 10 seconds left.
To end occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.
That's their reaction. Brilliant. Yeah. Sorry to have, been a woman speaking to you, but there you are. Doctor.
Okay. Let's break down what she did here. Watch this. This is what they do to try to shut down that narrative. Watch.
You say you don't approve of...
And do you think that Israel is a democratic country?
I know that Israel is a democracy. They have elections. No.
Okay. Is Israel a democratic country? This is the talking point all the pundits use. Yes, because they have elections. We have elections here too. But we also have a DNC that will handpick candidates. We have a DNC that will remove candidates off the ballot, which is happening right now. We've seen this before. We have super delegates that go against what the voters want. We have an electoral college. We do electoral college. We don't do popular vote. We have elections too. RFK Jr. repeats that same narrative. They have elections. You guys see it now? This is the propaganda machine. Notice they all have the same talking points. Let's watch what else she does.
Oh, this man is now has 4 courts against him because of 4 cases of corruption. This man knows if the war stops,
we haven't got time to do the entire history of Benjamin Netanyahu.
So he's talking about the corruption of Benjamin Netanyahu. Here's another propaganda. This is another thing that they do. We don't have time. You ever notice this? We only got a couple of minutes left and we have to wrap up. Piers Morgan has done this before too. All of a sudden you don't have time. You knew how much time you had when you scheduled this interview. That's an easy way out. Okay. That's an easy way out. Listen, when I studied broadcast journalism and we were starting to do interviews, this is when I was in college, they even told us if you get in an uncomfortable situation, one of the easiest ways out is to say you're running out of time. So I know this, man. You can't fool me. Let's continue.
Who is not a popular figure in Israel. I'm not here to defend Benjamin Netanyahu. Mustafa, is it possible to...
Whenever I speak about Palestinian rights or Palestinian situation, you claim it is history. I'm talking about what's happening today.
No, I know.
This is not history.
Can we just... You talked about how you don't want Israel. You're saying Israel that October the 7th happened. You're placing that in historical context. I understand that. Please don't say that again. We don't have time for it. You've made that point 5 times already.
I don't know.
Again, notice what she's doing. We don't have time. We're running out of time. We don't have time, but she's going on for quite some time here.
But you have time.
Oh my God! For the love of God, let me finish a sentence, man. I don't.
Now, this is another thing that they'll do. Now it is the guest who is being problematic. It's the guest who's being rude when the only one who's actually raising their voice is her.
Maybe you're not used to women talking. I don't know, but I'd like to finish a sentence, sir.
Now he's a sexist. You see this playbook, guys? You see this playbook? You see how this works? This guy actually was pretty calm. I don't even know what this guy was thinking at this point in time. But if it were me, I would just be like, what the hell is this woman on? Now, he can't raise his voice and he can't get to the same level that she's at because, again, she's already painted him as the boogeyman because he's defending the Palestinian people. So he has to remain calm. Meanwhile, she can act like this.
Anyway, so...
No, you are misleading the public now.
Really?
By claiming
I've got 20 seconds left. I'm not even going to bother trying to answer. If you don't think Israel...
Okay, watch this. She said she got 20 seconds left. Watch this.
This reaction is acceptable. What would have been an acceptable reaction to you? You've got 10 seconds left.
Okay, so you heard what she did, right? She said she got 20 seconds. All of a sudden, that 20 seconds got cut to 10 seconds. So now he only has 10 seconds to respond. And notice another piece of this propaganda. What is she doing? She said, Well, how do you think they should have responded? This is another talking piece that you continue to see these pundits do. Well, what should Israel have done then? Again, they're trying to only focus on October 7th and forget everything that happened prior to that.
To end occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.
That's their reaction.
And I told you how they respond when you mentioned the occupation. This gentleman said have peace for both people. She's objecting peace. This is the same thing they do with Russia and Ukraine. When people say we need to end the war and we need peace, you're the bad guy. I'm showing you all the propaganda today. Look at the look on her face. Watch this.
Occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.
That's their reaction. Brilliant. Yeah. Sorry to have, been a woman speaking to you, but there you are, Doctor.
And let's go ahead and end it with, once again, my guest is being sexist. When the only person who was rude, this video went viral on Twitter, by the way. The only person who was rude during this discussion was her. Now think about the article that we just read, that CNN is basically running this coverage by Israel before they publish it. You think that's just CNN? I don't think so. This is Talk TV. Talk TV is owned by who? Rupert Murdoch, another billionaire. He's on the side with Israel. He is not on the side of Palestinian people. Again, follow the money. Follow the money, folks. It's a damn shame. But shout out to The Intercept for getting that story. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super chat, Meteor Dreams. The Black church is already shilling for Biden. That's usually to be expected, Meteor Dreams. Again, you got to think about the age demographic as well, right? Shout out to Zach for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Zach a big whoop, whoop. Thank you for the super chat, Old Crow. We need to end dual citizenship for elected or appointed officials and also void government-funded security clearances for dual citizens. I second that, Old Crow. I agree with you 100% there. Thank you for the super chat. None of your business. Did CNN make a plane trip to Epstein Island? Oh, that's a good question. Thank you, P. Smith. Israel is killing journalists that report truth. Yes. Now connect it all back to them killing the journalists, the hospitals, etc. They're trying to prevent information from Gaza getting out. That's another way of controlling the narrative. Sebastian says we don't have journalists, we have copywriters. Thank you for the super chat, Wasim. In an interview with Owen Jones, Mr. Barghouti laughed and said that when she became triggered, they lost the narrative and showed their weakness. I could see that. And thank you for the super sticker, Grassy No. Whoop, whoop. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me out with the algorithm. Thank you very much. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe and share.